House will come back to order. This House will come back to order. Mr. Clerk, ring the bell. Okay, the first item that we're going to take up is we're going to have the morning roll call. We're going to have the morning roll call. All members present will please vote green to signify their presence in the chamber, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. All right, we're going now to the main order of business, and that is the consideration of concurrence with the governor's declaration of a public health emergency. We have two resolutions that are on your desk. The chair will call the House resolution first, and that is H.R. 3X. Ms. Clerk will read the caption.
H.R. 3X by Representative Burns, 159th, Trammell, 137th, and others. A resolution concurring with Governor Brian P. Kemp's Executive Order Number 03-14, 20.01, declaring a public health state of emergency and for other purposes.
The chair recognizes the majority leader of the House to explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you have both versions, the version that was passed by the Senate on your desk and our version that we will consider now. And I'll go ahead and contrast the 2 points difference on. They're exactly the same except these. They're the same except these couple lines, and I'll refer to them right now. In the Senate version, on lines 30 and 31, this public health state of emergency shall terminate on April the 13th, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. unless renewed by the governor. You understand that when it does expire in 30 days, that renewal will can be by the governor, will not require our ratification. Now let's go to the House version, what we'll be asking you to consider. That's the Senate version. On lines 30, 31, and 32 is where the differences exist, on 31 and 32. The same thing we're doing today. The governor has called for a state of emergency to exist, health state of emergency in Georgia. That state of emergency will terminate on April the 13th, 2020, unless renewed by the governor, and such renewal is ratified by this General Assembly, by this House, and by the Senate. That's the differences in the two resolutions. Now what we're going to ask for you to do today, what I'm going to ask you to do today, is to ratify H.R. 3X and adopt this and concur with the executive order, but with the language that in 30 days from the 13th, that we will come back here if necessary, and we hope and pray that it's not necessary. But if necessary, we will come back and renewal by the governor, asked for by the governor, that this House will come back and the Senate will come by and ratify that request. Any questions, Mr. Speaker? I think the members understand.
You do have some questions. The motion is non-debatable, but you do have a number of questions, and I hope you would take some of those in lieu of debate. Chair recognizes the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Kelly, to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Isn't it true, Mr. Leader, that in OCGA 38-351, it expressly says that Article 5, Section 2, Paragraph 7 of the Constitution requires the governor to call us in to ratify any initial declaration of public health emergency? Isn't that true?
I think the gentleman knows of what he speaks. I think that's the way that you interpret the Constitution, and that's the way that I think learned minds interprets it. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do, and what this resolution keeps us in concurrence and agreement with the Constitution of this state.
And if I could follow up with a question for the leader. So wouldn't it be true that in our minds, any such renewal should also have to meet the same standard as any initial declaration?
I would agree with the gentleman. Thank you
Mr.
for the
Leader.
question.
Chair recognizes the Minority Leader of the House, Leader Trammell, to your left for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
To you, Mr. Leader, I will.
Isn't it true that the will of this House is to do whatever is necessary to protect and support Georgians during this time?
Mr. Leader, I agree. I think we've taken an oath to do just that.
Will the gentleman further yield?
I yield.
And isn't it true that the language in the House resolution just reflects that we as elected members of this House and the General Assembly have a responsibility to Georgians to make sure that we carry out our duties to keep them safe?
Would agree with you, Mr. Leader, and I think that is a sacred responsibility, and we need to live up to it.
Chair recognizes the Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Chairman Fleming, to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the leader in the well. Mr. Leader, is it not true that the difference between the House resolution and the Senate resolution is probably very accurately described as a disagreement on the interpretation of a statute? Is that not true?
I would agree with the chairman. I think that's true.
Is it not further true, Mr. Leader, that at any time we as legislators or the courts of this state or nation interpret a statute, that we do that according to principles called the canons of statutory interpretation? Is that not true?
If the gentleman so states.
Is it not further true, Mr. Leader, that at any time we attempt to interpret a statute as we are doing in this moment, and that statute is what we commonly refer to as in derogation of the common law or statutes, which means that it runs afoul or different than something we would normally do in this case, giving the governor emergency powers because of these extingent circumstances, that we are to construe those statutes narrowly. In other words, we construe them conservatively, and we attempt to read nothing further into the statute, but we simply attempt to read it in such a way that does not contradict the other laws of this state. Therefore, is it not true that the House interpretation, which construes these statutes narrowly and would require us to come back into session if the governor renewed and once again validate his emergency declaration, is the best interpretation, and thus we should support the House version? Is that not true?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's true. We have full faith in our governor. He's doing a great job, but it's also we need to adhere to the law and setting precedent and the common law. Thank you for pointing those points, those issues out. I think it's prudent that we do our duty to represent the people of this state in the best manner and as the Constitution, as we believe, requires.
Chair recognizes the Dean of the House, Representative Smyrie, to your left for a question.
Mr. Leader, in interpretation of the statute that deals with special session and, of course, giving the governor broad powers as it relates to state of emergency, our resolution would just say that the governor would have the powers to implement the state of emergency, But at the same time, if there were to be called a renewal of the statute, it just had to be ratified by the members of this General Assembly. Is that not true?
To the Dean of the House, that's exactly what our resolution prescribes, and I think that's the proper course of action by this House. You've been here many years, and you've seen lots of things in this House and in the General Assembly, and I have great store in your wisdom.
And one of the reasons for that is that because if we were to, in ourselves, within our own deliberation, our own constitutional requirements, we could call a special session as members of the General Assembly and put it in here, and it would require 3/5 of the vote, but it would be a chance of the fact of the matter is that coming back, it would be in conflict with what we're trying to do today. So all the thing we're trying to do today is to pass a resolution giving the governor broad powers, state of emergency for the state of Georgia, and in conjunction with that, having to come back in 30 days to either ratify or renew what the governor would express to us in 30 days.
The gentleman knows of what he speaks, and I certainly agree with him as well. Thank you for the question and the statement.
Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
To my friend, yes.
Appreciate your work on this, leader, and I just appreciate the deliberation. I think the care that every member of this body has in this very sensitive time. I wanted to ask the leader, just as Code Section 38-351 gives the governor powers to call, make the call for these emergency powers, doesn't the same code section also give the General Assembly the power to withdraw those after a certain period of time?
It does.
So as I read this, I mean, the effect of this is we're both authorizing the powers and we're also withdrawing those powers after 30 days unless we act it again. So it seems like the power to withdraw those powers is executed as sort of the second step in this. It is sort of the part one that's given to us and part two that's given to us all roll up in this one resolution. Isn't that true, Mr. Leader?
That's true as well.
So I appreciate your consideration of this. I think we can do this in one resolution. But folks that have asked me the question, I believe the power to terminate exists in the General Assembly, and I appreciate us being able to do this in one resolution and get on the business with the people of Georgia.
Thank the gentleman for the questions, and I would remind us all that there is an executive, a judicial, and a legislative branch of this government in this state, and it's clearly defined in the Constitution the powers of each. And I believe that we're on the right course of business, and Mr. Speaker, are there any other questions?
You do have a couple of questions.
Well,
Chair recognizes Representative Reeves to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the leader yield?
I yield to my friend.
Mr. Leader, is it not true that OCGA 38-3-51 clearly lays out that the ratification of this matter includes the ability, it also includes the ratification of the ability of the governor to renew this emergency after 30 days?
Yes, it does. It does that, but it also requires the renewal to be ratified by this General Assembly as well.
But does the gentleman further yield?
I would yield.
Isn't it true that the law does not actually say, it does not actually require upon being renewed by the governor, there is no language stating that that ratification has to be made by the General Assembly as well?
Well, I think there's different interpretations of the law, but I think the powers are clearly defined, and we do have the responsibility to ratify the governor's renewal.
Does the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Mr. Leader, isn't it true that it is my concern and other members' concerns that if this outbreak is as devastating and bad as it potentially could be, that if the members of this body were to come down with this sickness and at the conclusion of 30 days, we were not able to bring the 3/5 requirement together and to achieve a special session and obtain the 91 votes to renew this emergency, that the emergency powers that are in the hands of the governor, he would not be able to utilize those under the scenario where if we're forced to come back here. but we cannot put enough votes together to get 91 votes. Is it not true that that concerns me?
Yes, it does concern, I know it concerns you, it concerns all of us, but at the end of the day, our law is, I think it's clear that we come back and we have to ratify the governor's renewal. Certainly, situations could, as you just alluded to, and that that all of us, of course, as you as well, hope does not come to fruition, could possibly happen, but there are lots of things that could possibly happen to prevent 91 votes from being here in this General Assembly. But I think now that this is something that is in the law, it's prudent for the members of this body to ratify the governor's, as we will do today, ratify the governor's public health state of emergency call resolution, and that we will do the same in 30 days from now.
I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
I'll yield for one more, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Bodie, the minority caucus whip to your left.
Does the leader yield?
I yield.
It is so true that 2 days from the governor's order, we are here in this chamber today, Mr. Leader.
That's true.
Is it not true that we have quorum today, Mr. Leader?
That is further true.
Is it not true that we can vote this resolution, HR 3EX, out today?
I believe that to be true as well.
Is it not true that if in 30 days we had an issue, that members of this body would probably uphold their oath and get back to this Capitol to ratify any necessary legislation or order or resolution that the governor presents to us?
The gentleman, I totally agree on that.
Thank you, Mr. Leader.
Thank you for the questions. Mr. Speaker, if there are no further questions, again, I will tell you, today we're here. We will perform our duty today. In 30 days from now, agree with the gentleman's statement. I believe that we will, if at all humanly possible, continue the work of representing the people of this state in a balanced effort to work with our governor, who again is doing an awesome job of protecting the people of this state. We have no qualms with that. But there again, there is a balance we must always strike. And I believe this balance resolution the language in this resolution strikes that balance. And I would ask the members of this body to concur with me and approve HR 3EX, and let's adopt that resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution, HR 3EX, will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the adoption of HR 3EX. The ayes are 145, the nays are 0. The resolution has been adopted, and under the rules of the House is being immediately transmitted to the Senate. We will okay, the House will be at ease until the Senate takes further action.